World War II was the most brutal war in human history. Countless major cities were left in ruins as a result. Today, nearly all geopolitical events and international relations can be traced back to this war. In previous videos, I've shared many stories from World War II, but in this video, let's dive deeper into the conflict, exploring it from start to finish. Exactly what happened, why this happened, and what was its impact. This is the story of World War II.
It is difficult to track down one single event that sparked the conflict, for ultimately it was a series of events that conspired together to eventually light the flame of war.
The world's most hated treaty, the Treaty of Versailles, thus starting World War II in 1939.
The whole world is against Hitler and Hitlerism.
Let's begin our story from the year of 1919. It was that year when World War I ended and the infamous Treaty of Versailles was signed. This treaty included a significant clause, Article 231, which held Germany responsible for all the losses caused by World War I, known as the War Guilt Clause. Despite the involvement of other nations, it placed the entire blame for the war on Germany. France and Britain sought to impose heavy reparations on Germany to recover their losses. As a result, the Treaty of Versailles demanded that Germany pay a fine of $33 billion to the Allied countries. In today's terms, this would be approximately $270 billion. This amount was so enormous that you won't believe it that Germany only made the final payment in 2010. It took nearly 100 years. You might wonder where this money came from. Naturally, it came from Germany, from its citizens. The first payment was made in 1921, and immediately after, Germany experienced hyperinflation. Back then, the currency was the German mark, and its devaluation was unimaginable. In 1922, a loaf of bread in Berlin cost 160 marks. By 1923, that same loaf cost 200 billion marks. The economy was devastated, and unemployment skyrocketed. In such dire circumstances, Adolf Hitler entered our story, a young political leader who knew how to manipulate the masses with his speeches. In 1923, Hitler's Nazi Party attempted to overthrow the German government by staging a coup. Although the coup failed, Hitler's popularity surged. Rumors spread that Germany's humiliation and international disgrace were due to anti-national elements within the country. The people were deeply distressed, therefore, it was very easy to manipulate them. Hitler claimed that Jews and socialists were responsible for Germany's shame. Over the next decade, propaganda was rampant, media outlets were bought, and hate speech filled the airwaves. I won't delve into the details here because this is not our main topic. Then came the Great Depression in 1929, which worsened the already dire unemployment situation. By 1933, 6 million people were unemployed in Germany. Many became homeless, and children were dying for starvation. As a result, in 1933, Hitler declared himself the dictator of Germany. After taking full control of the country, Hitler set out to realize his dream of a German empire, the German Reich, a racially pure state where only Aryans would reside. There would be no place for Jews or Slavs. To incite hatred in people, they promoted the Judeo-Bolshevism conspiracy theory, which falsely claimed that the Russian Revolution of 1917 was orchestrated by Jews, leading to the formation of the Soviet Union. In 1935, the world learned that Germany had an air force. This might not seem significant to you, since every country has an air force, but the Treaty of Versailles explicitly prohibited Germany from maintaining any military force. This was a blatant violation of the treaty by Hitler. However, by this time, many in Britain believed that the Treaty of Versailles was excessively harsh on Germany. They felt the exorbitant reparations had crippled the nation, and the ban on military power was overly demanding. In June 1935, Britain signed the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, formally acknowledging Hitler's right to build a navy. Germany was now allowed to have an independent navy, but Germany's growing militarization alarmed France, and they start to build a 450 kilometers long fortification along their eastern border, which is known as the Maginot Line. By 1938, when Hitler believed his military was sufficiently strong, he turned his attention to their neighbor nation, Austria. Austria was a crucial target for Hitler. He wanted all German-speaking countries to unite under one nation. His ultimate goal wasn't just to conquer as many countries as possible for his pride, but also to acquire resources to strengthen his own country. Hitler aimed to provide Lebensraum, living space, for the Aryan race, whom he believed to be racially superior, so they could live freely. In February 1938, Hitler met with Austrian Chancellor Kurt Schuschnigg and forced him into signing an agreement that allowed Hitler to place pro-Nazi individuals in the Austrian government. The Austrian government was infiltrated by these appointments. For example, Dr. Hans Fischbach, who became the new finance minister of Austria. He was a Nazi, and he freed other Nazis who were imprisoned. Within a month, the situation spiraled out of control. The Austrian chancellor realized that to stop the infiltration, the people needed to be consulted. He decided to hold a national vote on whether Austria should remain an independent country or unite with Nazi Germany. However, as soon as Hitler learned about the vote, he marched his army into Austria. The German military entered Vienna, but the Austrian chancellor did not want any bloodshed, so he resigned from his position. Hitler's propaganda ministry spread fake news claiming that the communists were responsible for the riots happening in Vienna. This is the reason why the Austrian government called in our troops to protect the country. The next day, the Austrian parliament was dissolved, and Austria ceased to be an independent country. This invasion was successful without any bloodshed. A major reason for this was that many people in Austria were, at this point, in favor of Hitler. They had been influenced by propaganda and believed that Hitler's invasion would benefit them. They were convinced that Hitler could turn their country into a superpower. After Austria, Hitler turned his attention to the next country, Czechoslovakia. On the Czechoslovakian border was the region of Sudetenland, which was home to approximately 3 million Germans. Hitler used this as an excuse to claim the region as German territory. He claims that this place should definitely be ours because Germans live here. At this point, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain enters our story. He did not want another war under any circumstances. He believed that if Hitler got what he wanted, he would be satisfied, and war could be averted. This led to the signing of the Munich Agreement in September 1938.
That the settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace.
Under this agreement, the Sudetenland will hand it over to Germany, provided Hitler promised no more wars. Hitler happily accepted this part of Czechoslovakia, but less than a year later, in March 1939, he violated the Munich Agreement by invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. This time, there was resistance, but the German army easily won the war, and splitting the country in two parts. One part was absorbed into German territory, and the other was turned into a Nazi client state, known as the Slovak Republic. British Prime Minister Chamberlain faced heavy criticism for his policy of appeasement. At this point, Winston Churchill famously remarked on Chamberlain's failure to stop Hitler, "You were given the choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor and you will have war." Meanwhile, Hitler set his sights on the next target, Poland. To seize control of Poland, Hitler cunningly signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union in 1939. While it seemed odd, given Hitler's hatred for the Soviet Union and communist ideology, the pact served a single purpose: to facilitate the invasion of Poland. The Soviet Union also wanted a portion of Poland, so their interests aligned. On September 1, 1939, nearly 1 million German troops began their assault on Poland, attacking from both the north and south simultaneously. The rest of the world was shocked. The UK and France had reached the end of their patience. They become worried, if Hitler continued invading one country after another, they could be next target. What will the state of the world be then? They couldn't stand it any longer. The UK issued an ultimatum to Hitler: if Germany proceeded with its invasion of Poland, they would declare war. Hitler ignored the warning, and as a result, the UK officially declared war on Germany. Soon after, France, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa and Canada followed suit, also declaring war on Germany. UK Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain announced this declaration on the radio.
A state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
But even with all these declarations, World War II hadn't truly begun. This period is often called the phony war, because, despite the declarations, no real fighting had started. Though these countries had declared war on Germany, none of them provided military support to Poland. And the Poland's army was very old-fashioned. They used horses in their army. They couldn't stand against Germany's military strategies at all. Neither Britain nor France could come to their aid. Poland had mobilized around 1.3 million people, but within just a week, the German army had defeated them. By September 8, 1939, German troops had occupied Poland. Here, it is important to mention about Hitler's Revolutionary War strategy, which is known as Blitzkrieg. With this strategy, Hitler was able to invade several countries. It was a military strategy that focused on speed and stealth. The approach was such that Hitler's army, equipped with tanks, would invade other countries with such speed that the opponents had no time to react. Additionally, the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, played a crucial role, making the invasions happen with lightning speed. The word Blitz means lightning in German, so Blitzkrieg translates to lightning war. Hitler aimed to keep wars short, wrapping them up in less than a week. To maintain the effectiveness of Blitzkrieg, German soldiers were given drugs, specifically a stimulant called Pervitin, which we now know as crystal meth.
Confidential military communiques reveal the Allies suspected the Nazis were using something to supercharge their troops, but they had no idea what it was.
This drug had profound effects. It eliminated fatigue, suppressed the need for sleep, reduced hunger and thirst, and boosted confidence. While incredibly harmful to their long-term health, in the short term, it made the German soldiers nearly unstoppable. While the defending forces rested at night, the German soldiers could fight day and night, completing their objectives in just a few days. As we continue the story, you'll see how successful Blitzkrieg was for Germany. If we return to Poland again, not only was the country invaded by Hitler, but it was also attacked by the Soviet Union from the other side. Once defeated, Poland was split in two, with half going to Nazi Germany and the other half to the Soviets. The Soviets justified this by claiming that the land originally belonged to them before the Russian Revolution, so they deserved it. However, the Soviet Union had its eyes on another former part of the Russian Empire, Finland. Stalin was concerned that Germany might invade Finland next, and he couldn't trust Hitler. The major concern was that Leningrad city, where Stalin lived. It was only 50 kilometers from the Finnish border. If Nazi Germany occupied Finland, they would be dangerously close to Stalin's home. To preempt this, the Soviet Union demanded that Finland hand over some territory. When Finland refused, the Soviets launched a military offensive in November 1939. The Soviet army was much larger and better equipped than Finland's, but the war dragged on for more than 2 months, with the Soviets making little progress. Finally, in March 1940, the war ended, and the Moscow Peace Treaty was signed. Under this treaty, 11% of Finland's land was ceded to the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, Hitler wasn't focused on Finland, he was eyeing Norway and Denmark. In April 1940, Hitler made his plans to take control of both countries. On April 9, 1940, he applied his Blitzkrieg strategy on Norway and Denmark. The invasion was swift and decisive, both countries were small and no match for the German army. The Norwegian government fled to London, where they established a government in exile. Meanwhile, in Norway, Hitler installed a puppet pro-Nazi government. Britain Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain acknowledged his failure. The failure was that he couldn't protect the neighboring countries from Nazi invasion. As a result, he resigned from his position as Prime Minister on May 10, 1940.
I sought an audience of the King this evening, and tendered to him my resignation, which His Majesty has been pleased to accept. His Majesty has now entrusted to my friend and colleague, Mr. Winston Churchill, the task of forming a new administration on a national basis.
The responsibility of taking on the position of Prime Minister now falls to the infamous Winston Churchill. That same day, Hitler launched an all-out attack on France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. This all-out attack made it clear to the world that Hitler has no intention of stopping. Earlier, I mentioned that France had built the Maginot Line, a defensive wall along its border, because they feared an attack from Hitler. French troops were stationed along this wall to protect the country. Allied forces were also positioned along the borders of Belgium and Luxembourg to defend them. However, Hitler used his Blitzkrieg strategy once again. More than 1,000 fighter bombers and around 3 million soldiers were deployed in what became known as the Battle of France. The German troops were divided into 3 groups, A, B, and C. Group B was tasked with attacking the Netherlands and then entering Belgium to engage the Allied forces. Group C's attack on the Maginot Line was merely a diversion, allowing Group A to secretly carry out their master plan, invading France through the Ardennes forest. French military experts regarded this forest as nearly impenetrable, akin to a vast fortress. They assumed the German army would never attempt to pass through it. However, using more than 40,000 military vehicles, Group A successfully entered France through the Ardennes. And, on May 15, 1940, they quickly captured Sedan and began advancing northward. The British forces, who were engaged with Group B in Belgium, were shocked by the suddenness of the attack from behind. The soldiers were surrounded by the Nazi army on 3 sides, with only one escape route, through the sea near the port of Dunkirk. So, they planned to escape from there. What happened at Dunkirk was a pivotal moment in World War II. Nearly 400,000 Allied troops were stranded on the beaches of Dunkirk. When I say Allied, I'm referring to the British and French armies. The group of countries fighting against Hitler was known as the Allies, and the countries supporting Hitler were called the Axis powers. It was crucial to save the Allied soldiers in time because the Nazi army was rapidly advancing toward them. They had no other way to escape, they could only evacuate through the sea. If this couldn't be done in time, 400,000 troops could have been killed there. It would have been a huge blow for Britain and France, and they might have lost their countries forever. Winston Churchill devised a plan to evacuate the soldiers. On May 26, in 1940, Operation Dynamo was launched, the largest evacuation in military history. On land, the German army had reached the beaches and was firing at the troops, while the German Air Force attacked from above. Christopher Nolan made the incredible film Dunkirk, which masterfully depicts the events that took place there. The film focuses on three key aspects of the evacuation. First, the British Royal Air Force's counterattack. The British ships coming to evacuate the Allied soldiers were provided cover by the British Air Force to protect them. Second, some private fishing boats in the English Channel and ordinary civilians joined in to help with the evacuation. And third, the events on Dunkirk's beach, where soldiers were trying to save themselves and help each other. By June 4, 1940, nearly 350,000 soldiers had been successfully evacuated, as you might have seen in the film. But the bad news was that most of the Allied forces' military equipment was lost during the evacuation. Just days later, on June 22, France surrendered to Hitler. By this time, Italy was under the rule of dictator Mussolini. He formed an alliance with Hitler to wage war against France. The alliance between Italy and Germany was known as the Pact of Steel. The two countries declared war on France and Britain on June 10. By July 1940, Hitler had established control over nearly all neighboring countries: Austria, Poland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and France. At this point, the major powers involved were Germany, Britain, and the Soviet Union. Germany and the Soviet Union had a peace agreement, so Hitler wasn't worried about the Soviets. Soviet Union wouldn't attack Germany. Britain was the only one that still stands against Germany. You might be wondering about America's role. At this point, America wasn't involved in World War II yet. The US was standing back because, after World War I, US wasn't interested in interfering with Europe's situation. It was clear that if the fighting had stopped at this point, Hitler would have been the clear victor. So how did the situation take a turn, and how did Britain manage to defeat Germany? Let's continue this story in the next video, part 2 of our series on World War II. I know what you're thinking, this might sound frustrating, having to wait for part 2, but don't worry, I won't keep you in suspense for too long. In the meantime, you can watch this video, where I explained how Oppenheimer became the father of the atomic bomb, and how Hiroshima and Nagasaki were destroyed. You can click here to watch it. I'll see you in the next video. Till then, stay well, stay safe. Goodbye for today.